This morning thoughts. I was just thinking about how some of us know what's going on. And although you may not have known exactly what was going on, but you've kind of known what's been going on the whole time. Like, I remember basically since the time I was 14 or so, knowing that this whole thing was fucked, you know? And knowing that the government was just a false entity that we were all taught to believe in, and voting is false. It's almost a humiliation ritual now, going to vote. I can honestly tell you that I've never in my entire life voted because I've always known what this is. And that's fucking sad, man, because deep down in my heart, I've known the whole time that we live in a fake little construct that is just, like a thin little slime mold on top of this chaotic yet organized system that's almost like you're on a farm. It's been curated, you know what it is. When you know what it is, it's hard to shop at fucking Walmart and eat McDonald's. It's hard to believe in any kind of religion or a fucking institution because you know what it really is. And as time goes on, you fucking crystallize the vision of what it really is based on the little pieces of evidence that you're, I would say, allowed to pick up, but you're definitely not allowed to have the whole picture, not in any one place. But as you listen and learn, you start to see what's going on and what's possibly going on. But what's really going on, people, is that slavery never went away. Blacks were never freed. Just everybody else was thrown in the same pile, you know. You're a slave. We're all slaves. We're all taxed at like 50% of everything we earn, plus some, I'll bet, just based on the other bullshit hidden taxes, i.e., interest, which is what I'm getting at eventually, i.e., registration on your cars, you know. And then you start to have these wars where your government's in this other fucking country's business and stuff like that. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? Why are we fighting these wars, over in Europe? World War One, World War Two. Why are we fighting over in fucking Vietnam? Why are we fighting over in Korea? Why are we fighting over in fucking, the Philippines? Why are we fighting over in Korea, in Japan? Why are we fighting Japan? Why are we fighting? And you realize eventually, possibly you realize that these wars are just ways to rebalance the fucking ledger of the dead banking system. That if we're all playing with imaginary money, there's not actually enough money to pay anybody back. It's all based on interest and debt and inflated cash, fiat currency, and it can never actually be paid back because it doesn't exist. No one actually holds the money. It's just imaginary bullshit. And once all the coffers get low enough, once people start calling their debts in, you can't actually pay it. You have to go to war. Now, what's even more fun is people are blaming the Jews right now, and people are blaming the fucking central banks, and people are blaming this, and people are blaming that. That's all fun and games. But what's really going on is who the central banks settle with, and that's the Bank of International Settlements. The Bank of International Settlements is in a town called Basel, Switzerland, and they are who all the countries' central banking systems go through to transact with each other, you know? It's the central clearinghouse for all the world's governments, all the countries. And they lend out at interest with money that doesn't exist. The Bank of International Settlements is a private entity that has private shareholders, and part of their charter, which was brought up post World War II, is that they are above and beyond any kind of rules and laws of any individual country. So, in other words, they cannot be processed, prosecuted, charged with anything ever in regards to their banking business. Now, the individual people can still commit murder and go to prison. They can still commit rape and whatever else. But as far as their banking interests go and their banking business goes, they are above all law. They make the money. They move the money. They balance the ledgers. Right? And they decide who gets to go to war with whom in order to keep things fuzzy-wuzzy and happy down here. And you say, who's calling the shots? Who's making Trump go to war over fucking, Iran? It's the Jews. It's the Palestinians. It's the fucking Israelis. It's none of that. It's the fucking bank deciding where they have to let steam out of the system so that the whole fucking thing doesn't collapse. The wars must happen in order to balance the fucking ledgers. So, knowing that shit, you got to just pretend that, it's something else all the time. I know how the money's made, The money's made when you take a home loan. When you take a home loan from a bank, that money does not fucking exist. They did not loan you any money. They're allowed to loan. These large banks are allowed to loan on a fractional reserve banking system. That means that they're allowed to loan out 90% more than they actually have. So if you give them $100, they can loan out 90% of that to somebody else. Right? That means that they don't actually have that money. So if you loan out 90% and only have to hold 10% in reserves, so if you give somebody $100, they're going to loan out $900 on that $100. Because they only have to hold 10% of it. And then you've got to pay it back at whatever interest rate the Fed set. The Federal Reserve sets the interest rate. Why do they set the interest rate? Because they're the ones that are making the money, right? That's how they get the flow to come back in. They call it growing the economy, You wonder why the Federal Reserve would set the interest rates for home loans. Home loans should be whatever the fuck they want it to be. But the Federal Reserve sets the interest rates because that's where they make the money. That's where the money comes from. That's where the inflation comes from. As you borrow money from the bank to build homes and buy homes, that money gets created right then and there. It doesn't exist. It was never paper. It was never zeros and ones in a bank account. It's actually just a credit that you've given to the bank on money that they don't have that you're going to pay interest to them on. And as you pay that money back to the bank on money that didn't actually exist, they take that money that you're putting into the bank and they re-lend it back out again at 10% fractional reserve. And those cocksuckers in the Federal Reserve are also private lenders out for profits. We don't know who the fuck they are. We know who the chairperson is, but we don't know who the rest of the people are. We don't know who the private investors are. Just as we don't know who the Bank of International Settlements shareholders, investors, board of directors are. So if that's what the Federal Reserve is doing at our level, keep in mind the Bank of the International Settlements is doing that at a countrywide level. And you wonder why we're fighting wars in different countries and who's actually in charge. It's not the Jews. They were guilty of a lot of it. This was going on during World War I, World War II. This was the cause of the Civil War in the United States, not slavery. It was fighting over whether or not we were going to allow the Bank of England, a privatized central bank, to continue to try to drive what was going on in the colonies. And it was over whether or not the colonies were going to install a privatized central banking system. Off on a tangent. So, if you know this, and yet you still have to function in our fucking society, pay taxes and registrations on your cars, and play serious when these fuckers are taking all that money and dicking off around and having little dance parties and chopping their dicks off and fucking dancing in front of owls and eating babies and all this stuff, you know? If you know this, it just hollows out everything in your fucking heart. There's nothing. I know that this is all just bullshit. And I've known it for a very, very, very long time. And then I realized you can't escape. I mean, you can, but where are you going to go? And go live in the woods. Till they catch you and make you come back and play the game. Not allowed to escape the game. But you just think about how beautiful the world could be if it wasn't like this. It doesn't have to be like this. It just happens to be like this. You know? It just happens to be like this. The world could be a much different place. Much better place. And, of course, this can't last forever. Humanity can't really last forever. But it's a neat little experiment. I find the belief in God and Satan and whatnot, which I guess if you're going to believe in God, you shouldn't even say Satan because Satan's a creation of God. So, I mean, if you're going to believe in God, I think that God is a tinker toy of the human mind. God is definitely a tinker toy of the Bank of International Settlements. If there was a God, you would say that that's who these people are. But, yeah, I'm playing with fake money in a fake system. I watch people go worship fake gods. And, and then, you know, you think about, we're down here on the farm, man. We're down here creating the energy. We're down here buying the homes, building the homes. Just like in the Matrix, right? And I got my son who's 21. He doesn't know any of this. He knows something's fucked up, but he doesn't know any of this. And you can't teach this. This takes years and years and years and years and years to absorb until you can see it. And then you just gotta watch him do it, you know. But I gotta sit back and know what it is: eating poison food, taking drugs to keep us complacent so that we don't notice it, so we can't put the whole picture together. Some of us can see. Some of us can see. Good morning.